welcome back to part 2 of episode 7, or it could be episode 8. Yes, he's back. He came back to do more. We weren't just going to leave it hanging last week. So we'll go with your next choice.
My number 3. Wait, I'm doing because I'm doing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. My number 3. I
We'll
only
mix it up.
yeah. My number 3 is the only 40k one I've got, and I thought long and hard about this. And I thought about people. I thought about Fabius Bile. I thought about being an edgelord and being like, oh, the Emperor or sort of stuff like that. But the edgelord, the Emperor, I don't think is evil from what I know of him. And the Primarchs kind of seem to know what they're doing. Like they seem to believe in what they're doing. So it's like a pious evil rather than an intentional evil.
Like ends justify the means sort of thing.
Well, where they think they're right. Like you're saying
Yeah.
about the Emperor, he thinks he's right. Whereas I class a villain as someone who knows they're doing bad things, but they're not going to stop. And so I've picked Asdrubal Vecht.
The Dark Eldar fella.
Because he is possibly the most evil thing in all of 40k. Because he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's just a horrible person, And it's like he doesn't have because I think a lot of people compare sort of the Eldar and the Dark Elder to the High Elves and the Dark Elves, like in fantasy, because they're all like 40k was very derivative of fantasy to start with.
Space elves, aren't they, originally?
Yeah, where their lore was kind of similar for a bit. Then they became the totally different things, and then I think towards the end of fantasy, they tried to tie fantasy to 40k a bit, and go, oh, actually, high elves have soul stones now, and things like that. Like I think it was way shards that wood elves have and stuff. But with the Dark Eldar, like they are just evil. Like they in order to live, in order to survive, in order for their souls to actually keep going, they have to they feed on fear, they feed on suffering. So like unlike sort of Helebron, where she's bathing in the blood for her god's favor, I can't favor.
I'll let it back in, it's fine.
Like unlike Helebron, where she's bathing in like sacrifice people's blood for their god's favor, like the Dark Elder are going, hey, we need slaves, but we need to keep them alive as long as possible and make sure that their lives are agony so that we can feed on the agony. And it's all like, the dark crystal where the scientist like drains the essence out of people and stuff like that. And then the Dark Elves are like, ooh, let's drink this fear essence and stuff and keep ourselves going. But it's like, unlike Malekith, that he's like the equivalent character to, Vecht is he doesn't have a tragic story. He doesn't have this sort of, anti-hero arc where he, things were stolen from him and that's like why he's a bad person and stuff. But actually he could have been like a wonderful person and he could have been like the greatest leader of elves, and that the world could have been a far happier place had this betrayal not been put upon him. Vecht is just a bastard. Like Vecht is he's basically born a slave and then just murders his way to the top, essentially, like, because he's a crafty bastard. And just is one of the cleverest people in all of 40k because he plays everyone against themselves. Like he's fully aware of his enemies and he's like has them all in his place, and that the entire universe is like a chessboard for Vecht, but where he doesn't care about anyone. Like he while we talk about people who like you say, genocide planets and sort of murder people and whatnot, when we talk about Vecht, we're like, yeah, but he actually needs suffering to survive. He'll kill his own people in horrendous ways, and he doesn't even care about his culture. Like unlike Malekith, where he actually cares about Dark Elf civilization and he cares about, keeping his race alive and stuff like that. But burning at the heart of it is revenge against the High Elves. Vecht is just like, yeah, I'll kill as many people as I want to as long as I stay in charge and this. So we have all these incidents. Like I think the last bit of lore that we have for Vecht, and hopefully they're going to expand on it, is that he actually opens up the warp. What is it?
He's in the webway.
Yeah, that's it. He opens up the webway to like welcome Slaanesh demons into the webway purely to kind of kill his enemies. So he's kind of like going, hey, let's get all of my enemies in a room, then we'll let Slanesh demons in and they can run rampant and kill everyone in Kimura. And I'm just going to step
This
out.
is where he lived. This is the capital city of his
His
action.
and he's just like, cool. And that their only protection was that Slanesh couldn't enter the webway, and then the webway is so vast that they couldn't find them in there. And then he just pulls a trick like that. But then he's and you know that there's some wonderful strategy behind it, and that he'll come out on top in the end, because he does kind of go and exit stage left, at the end, and sort of escapes from it all, and manages to kill all of his enemies in the process without it seeming like he's killed all of it, actually assassinated them. And he's crafty, and I think, like, we talk about Kemler being so dangerous because he has the ability to actually do evil deeds. Like Vecht has that on another level. Like, I think he wipes out a Space Marine fleet by opening up a webway portal into one of the ships to make it crash into the other ships. So it's like, the video game Portal, where you kind of open up things, and so he just kills an entire fleet by doing that. But I think he also crashes it into all of his generals that he's not particularly happy with. So he kills all of their ships at the same time by using Space Marine ships.
I know the Dark Eldar are beyond it with liking torture and how they treat their captives, and you don't want to be captured by them. And there's also a layer to them that and he'll have it because he's sort of the top man, isn't he? But they are what the Eldar were before Slanesh, the birth of Slanesh. So that's how far the Eldar civilization had.
I don't think it was that they were. I think it was like they are the extreme of the Eldar situation, and like you get with the High Elves, like, because in the video I did a couple of weeks ago from the Dark Elf book, it talks about like the different stages, like what death is like for the elves. And in 8th edition, this didn't exist before 8th edition, but they went like, hey, when high elves die, they don't want to be devoured by Slanesh, because Slanesh is like always out sort of trying to get delicious elf souls. So they put their souls into soul stones, the same as 40k. And the Dark Elves just don't. The Dark Elves are just like, well, if that happens, that happens.
We'll risk it.
I'm just going to live my life to the fullest. And so I think the Dark Elder are very much, they're very much like that, where they know that Slanesh is going to get them in the end. So that's why they sort of live their life as fully as they can, but then at the cost of everyone else. But I run I run a homunculus coven army for.
It just sounds horrific.
It is like it's just this sort of thing where, like, we talk about like fantasy isn't that dark. Like, it's got really dark bits, but it doesn't get too dark. Like, I think the Dark Elves are probably as dark as you get in like fantasy, whereas 40k just goes, yeah, there's a guy and he murders people, and like in horrific ways, like noise marines and stuff. And then you have it where, like, the Dark Eldar, they live for so long that they get bored, and they get bored of sensation. So someone just kind of wakes up one day and goes like, oh, I think I'll go to the local doctor or homunculus, and I think I'll get my skin removed, because that'll like that'll make the day a bit more exciting, won't it? When I'm in constant agony.
Just something to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. They're like, oh well, I think I'll get my limbs removed and replaced with hooks because bit bored, and that's the idea, and the idea of they're living off their own sort of suffering, and that the homunculi are just kind of like going, cool, let's do this, and let's just mess around, and let's torture people and stuff like that. I mean, it's so the scary thing is that racks and stuff, where they're these horrible skinless horrors where they're all like deformed and they're all mutilated, they've done that willingly.
Ugh.
And you just kind of go, wow, that's really evil. Like, it's not just killing people. It's not just orcs being like, hey, we just came here, we wanted your stuff, so we murdered you. It's not like the Necrons being like, this is ours, get off our world, kind of thing. It's
have you used them in
horrible?
Have you used them in the game?
Yeah.
What's he like?
Dark. What? Oh, do you mean Vecht?
Yeah.
I know. I've never played Vecht because he needs a fucking model. Games Workshop, if you're listening, stop making Primaris bloody lieutenants and give us a Vect model. Because
their book is next, so you never know.
But it does sound like they haven't done anything, though. It sounds like there is no releases at all for this. It's literally just a book and maybe some cards. Maybe some dice. Ooh, but they'll probably have the witch cult symbol on, which I don't really care about. That's a bit of a moan there, but no. But you just go, if there was ever one kit that you could charge £100 for that every player would buy, it's Vect, because he had a model in like 5th edition, and he was badass, like rules wise. But it's odd. It's very odd for him not to have rules and a model in the game. And now that like Games Workshop are kind of straying towards that, hey, it's silly having this guy in the game because if he gets killed, that would massively change the lore of the universe. But now they're like, hey, here's the Silent King. Hey, here's Primarchs. Here's
chuck him in or not.
Yeah, that's it. So there's no reason now. They don't even have that excuse of going, oh well, he's a bit too important to just put on the battlefield. It's like, nope, put Vect in the game and make him as good as he. I don't care if he's like a 700 points or something. It's. But yeah, I know I've more talked about Dark Eldar Society rather than Vect, but everything bad is true about Vect.
Well, I would lump that in because they are proper unredeemable villains themselves. I think the Dark Eldar.
Yeah,
they're not doing it because they follow a god or they're deluded about something or for material gain. I think they're just like inflicting pain as a way to evade. Well, that's how they get out of being kidnapped by Slanesh or something like that. Yeah,
it's. I think that I think I saw when you're on YouTube and you're watching videos and then it goes, you watched a 40k video. Here's hundreds of videos which are like sort of like who's the most evil in 40k and speculative stuff, and you're like, oh, I don't really care. But and one of them came up saying like, what's the most horrible thing in 40k? And it's like, oh, getting murdered by orcs, or sort of like, like chaos, or being trapped in the warp or something, or being attacked by the Tyranids. And you're like, no, it's literally being captured by the Dark Eldar. I don't care what other justification you have. The idea of getting murdered or getting your soul sucked or something like that, like that's bad. But these guys will literally keep you alive for like 1,000 years beforehand, torture you within like an inch of your life every day of your existence, and then if you die, they'll find a way to keep you going. Because the Dark Eldar are kind of past death, where it's like, because you get like the homunculi where they can bring themselves back to life from anything. So if like a bit of one survives, like a chunk of flesh, then like the acolytes or the racks will kind of grab it and then take it back to the lab and then go, right, time to bring him back from this, because they don't have souls. They're kind of totally, their flesh is all they are, but that it carries all their memories. So
it's not going to be quick if you're captured by the Dark Eldar. It's not going to be quick death.
That's it. And it's just the idea of like, so when you get homunculi that like want to die, like where they literally go onto the battlefield going, I need to find a new and exciting way to get killed today. I've never been blown up by a las cannon. Let's try that, And it's just such a strange, evil way of working. And it's totally, I'd say they're the most evil thing in 40k.
Good choice. Well, from grimdark seriousness, my next villain is Warlord Queek.
That's an off-the-wall one. I wouldn't have expected that.
I like. Well, he's just. There's something about him that he's not like the other Skaven. He's the hand-picked champion of, is it Nordwell, the chief of Clan Moors?
Yeah.
He's like the chief of the Storm Vermin, and he's not like the Skaven are typically the runaway. Even their leaders are total cowards. They'll throw everyone in front of them, and they'll pile the blame off onto anyone else, and they're not brave. But Queek's like the opposite. He actually goes after personal combat, and he's also mad. So when he kills people, he takes trophies of them, who then he talks to them. And apparently, the reason he's got hands on, I forget whose hands on his trophy rack, it's because the head had an annoying voice and the hands don't talk. So he's like a crazy brave Skaven, which is like, this is totally going against the grain of what the Skaven are all about. But I like him basically because he's I don't like dwarfs, and he's instrumental in holding on to Carrick 8 peaks and stopping the dwarves keeping hold of it. But he's the chief of like, he's got his own particular unit of storm vermin who are like even bigger than normal ones. He just seems like he's just a fun character. I had him in, his model's great in 8th edition, although it is fine cast, because for a long time they had the old metal one where he's got like the 2 weapons.
Yeah,
but then he's leaping in the new one. It's a bit more dynamic new. Inverted commas.
Is that good for you though? Because I have a bit of a rant because of, I don't like it when they try to make models like monopose but really dynamic, and that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and you're like, how did it get this far? Like Khan the Betrayer, that is the silliest model, I think, the new one of that where he looks like he's skipping or tripping, and you're just going, why is this the final pose? Like, why, and it's very odd, and a lot of the models like do look great, but I would be tempted to be like, look, just have them standing up.
Yeah, it's hit and miss, especially with ranking up, and storm vermin are so difficult to rank up anyway, because I don't know who angled the halberds, but they don't work.
Well, it's like Phoenix Guard, where you just go, you have to rank the unit up as you're gluing them, otherwise these are never gonna
or right underneath tip X in where they go in the line. But he's just fun. He's just off the wall. He's not a serious character, but he is a villain. He likes, he's dedicated to picking out dwarven heroes and killing them, or he's invaded the Empire. And he just does what he's the enforcer for Clan Moors.
Yeah.
But I like, he's almost like a spoilt child, because he was picked out at a young age to be like, all right, this is what we're going to use him for. He's given all the best stuff. He's told, he's given these magic weapons. He's given this magic armor. He's told he's the best. He's put in charge of like the elite unit. And then it's just like, let go. And like, well, of course, this is what he'd be like. Of course, he'd think he'd be the best. Of course, he'd want to challenge
I think we're touching on something here where, like, you're suggesting that, like, it's societal pressure that turned him into a schizophrenic.
Well, if you want to go deep dive into it, his entire culture says cowardice is the better way to advance, whereas his personal ambition is to be brave and challenge people. So there's like a tension there. That's probably a bit too much into it.
I quite like it, because I don't think, you're saying he's a villain because, like, of the deeds he does. You're saying he's a villain because he's on the side of the bad guys, but he's a wonderful character. Like, way, like you were saying.
Yeah, he is a villain. Like this, his aims are horrendous because he's a Skaven, so he's not going to want anything good for anyone who's not a Skaven, or even if they are. But he's just a fun, like, he's not world changing, but he's a good character. I like his background. I like his rules are pretty good.
Yeah, because a friend of mine, it's been really annoying because, like, a friend of mine got into fantasy just before the pandemic, so he kind of started working on armies, and we played like a couple of tester games. Probably some of the last games I played, actually. And then obviously the pandemic happened, so he's been kind of working on all these fantasy armies and getting really into the hobby, and then not being able to play at all. So he keeps sending me all these lists, being like, "Hey, okay, I've decided I'm going to do a Skaven army," and he's bought all of these models already. And then he's just like, "Oh, how's this?" And he's got like Queek and then Queek Storm Vermin and stuff. And you're like, it's actually a pretty good list, but it's a shame that he can't use it. Like,
yeah, just to see how it works, really.
That's it. But I've never fielded Queek. Like, I don't think I've ever used any. I think I've only used Deathmaster Snitch. He's the only Skaven character I've ever used.
Well, the other Skaven characters are like, they're all, well, Thankwell's like, I don't know, he's like is he a joke? He's borderline joke serious, isn't he? He's like, I'll get you next time.
I think Thankwell nearly made my list, but I don't know enough about him. Like, I'm not too into the Skaven lore to be able to sort of safely say, oh, he's one of the greatest villains. But I really like him, and I think rules wise he's very powerful. I mean, they brought out like the end times rules for him that were silly. Like, it went a bit too far, but it went to the point of going, now you can't field him unless you use the silly 20, like 50% Lord's allowance. But in the actual Skaven book, he's pretty good.
Yeah, but like they're all like the high, like they're trying to manipulate things in their own interests. Oh, Thankwell certainly is. Queek's like, he's like the head doorman or something, or he's like a mob enforcer, and they just say, yeah, we need you to solve this problem. When they can't do it by subterfuge or whatever like that, they've got this guy that they can just say, yeah, you deal with it because it's in your era, it's in your area of expertise.
Well, murder.
Yeah, well, not even murder, just like being a crazy, challenging hero character, but for bad.
But they should do it where he sounds like Hitman or something. Where he
Yeah, he's a bit like that.
Maybe we could get Queek Headtaker in like a suit or something with like a silenced like pistol, and then just
comment below.
Do
that. Yeah.
Anyone with Photoshop skills, that's what we want to see.
Do it. I've never used him. I know he's got this rule where, because he doesn't trust Grey Seers, you can't have him and a Grey Seer in the same unit. So his fluff sort of blends over into the tabletop. And he's been in the game for ages. I remember my friend had. Did he have him? Certainly had the Skaven Codex.
He's always been in. I'm pretty sure he was back in 4th.
Yeah, he was in 4th. I think that Metal Modeler is in 4th. So he's just sort of like a villain that's, as far as I've been into fantasy, he's been there and I've known about him. And he's like a he's not a joke character, but he's not serious. And like,
I don't think any of the Skaven characters are serious. It's one of those ones where it's like all of they're very much a race where they're taken with a pinch of salt. Like where
Skrulk's probably the most unpleasant because there's nothing really very funny or amusing about him. But well, I've gouged my eyes out because the Nurglitch is such a.
I just think if you put a laughter track on it, anything's funny.
You've been watching The Big Bang Theory, haven't you?
Let's not go that far.
That was it. That's just quick.
Yeah, that's it. It's like now my next one, my number 2, is probably going to be a surprise that it's this low down, but it's actually Nagash.
Ooh,
Naga, because now you're going to be like, ooh, who's number 1 there?
I'm going to write down who I think is number 1.
Okay, you write down who you think is number 1. But yeah, Nagash. Like I probably won't talk very long about Nagash because his history is like epic, and he's one of the most evil things in the Warhammer world, and he's, like we were saying with Moonclaw, he's totally separate to everything. He's like an additional threat.
Yeah.
Rather than chaos, it's the fact of Nagash is like a threat to everyone, because the fact is that if Nagash wins and destroys everyone, then chaos doesn't have any worshippers. And if he murders everyone, well, that's kind of bad for everyone else. But to the point where he's so powerful and he's such a threat that he's hated by everyone. I think the only person in the Warhammer world that seems to kind of like him is Arkan the Black, and I think that's kind of Stockholm syndrome. Arkan the Black's like, no, well, got really nothing to do. I'm a bit, because Arkan the Black, I think they gave him like a love story in the, I think it was the Mike Lee Nagash novels, which are amazing. Go buy them. I think they've released them all in an omnibus now. But the Mike Lee Nagash trilogy is brilliant. And then I think they did the what's his name? Josh Reynolds, who was amazing and did like the Blood of Nagash series, where he kind of elaborated on Neferata and elaborated on Wasoran, and didn't get much further than that because the end times happened. But gave him like a love story where Arkan the Black was in love with Neferata. And then when she spurned him, Arkan the Black is like, well, all I've got in my life now is serving Nagash, so that's what I'm going to do. So when Nagash is dead,
Arkan
the Black
friend
is still
zoned into Nagash worship.
That's it, and he's fanatically loyal. I think Arkan the Black to Nagash, where even at the end times he's like, "Yep, I'm bringing him back. He'll destroy everything, and he'll probably stop me having a will of my own. But nah, some men just want to watch the world burn."
He's got a very long list of negative impacts on the world. Nagash, hasn't he?
I quite like Nagash because he's a problem solver. He's definitely a problem solver in terms of going.
I'm not going to be the king, so I'll murder the king and take his take the throne.
I mean, he's just crafty. But Nagash, he's very, very tricksy. Like and this is obviously me, as a gay person coming. I quite like the idea of Nagash because he's got that kind of sort of grand vizier, like the what's his name, Jafar from Aladdin vibe, where it's this idea of going, yes, he wants Jasmine, but he's a massive gay, like underneath it, like he's someone who has absolutely no sexual desire whatsoever. Like he's kind of, and I like this idea of like, I don't know, like I think
a new interpretation of Nagash. Okay.
I'm gonna put it down as Nagash is a gay icon. Fight me.
Yeah, he certainly has got a fabulous hat.
That he does in the end times model. That is a très bien chapeau, I think.
But like his list of negative impacts on the Warhammer world would be invented necromancy,
which from dark elves. So
yes, tortured dark elves. Yeah. Poisoned the Great Vitae River, ending Karen civilization.
I'm willing to say that's one of my favorite things in Warhammer, where he gets defeated, and rather than taking it like a champ and being like, oh well, I guess they were more powerful, he's just like, I poisoned their water supply.
Yeah, I'll kill everyone
ever, and then raises them all back to life.
Yeah.
As his servants, and nearly gets away with it if it wasn't for the pesky Skaven who. So he does this. He poisons the water supply, kills everyone in their entire land, and then goes, right, I'm going to do I'm going to eat fuck tons of warpstone. I'm going to do a ritual to raise all of the dead in the entire land across, and then I'll just take over the world.
I'll do it that way.
and he does it. He actually pulls it off, does it, but is so tired afterwards that some Nehekaran bastard,
Alcadazar, that's his name.
I never, one of those words where you read it in novels and you're like, thank God I don't need to say that anymore, because we're not going to get into Tomb Kings for a while on the channel. Spoilers. Alcadazar, like with the help of the Skaven, kills him while he's tired, while he's worn out, and you're just like, but then obviously the dead still stay around because that's how powerful the spell was, and they become the Tomb Kings, and they kind of go like, so technically, he created a whole race,
Yeah, he did. Inventing necromancy, bringing the Tomb Kings back, being responsible for vampirism in a roundabout way.
I think they've retconned it a bit because he invented vampirism by creating a potion, like
it's the elixir of life, isn't it?
Yeah, the elixir of life, where it does actually just make you immortal. Like there's no downsides whatsoever. It just makes you mortal, but you don't like the sun, like kind of thing. You're a bit like, meh, I don't really like that. But you're effectively immortal without a downside. And then I think in the Mike Lee books they have it where Neferata tries to recreate it with Arkan the Black's help, and then they get it where it gives you bloodlust, where you do stay alive, but it gives you like horrendous bloodlust, and that's when the vampires get created, so that they're all like her progeny.
And he's still in a roundabout way responsible. Yeah,
that's it. It's all this idea, but I think vampires wouldn't exist because I think what happens is when Nagash comes back the first time, and all these vampires like Wasoran and stuff are like, "Oh, Master, you're back. We will worship you," like kind of thing. And all the other vampires are like, "We can take him." Oh, okay, we'll do what you say.
It's bound to his will still, aren't they? Because he's.
That's it. Because I think the thing is that the vampires are separate to Nagash. Like they can't be bound as easily to his will. Like he can't just go click his fingers and take control of them. But they feel a calling to him. Like they feel a calling from him, and that they can't get him out of their head, and and they go, it's just going to be easier if we just do what you say, but hope that you die one day and that we can get back control, which is what happens. But and he's kind of like going, what the hell are you? Like, you're not what I wanted, but oh well, you're pretty good at killing stuff. I guess I'll let you live. Well, bad choice of words there.
Let you remain dead.
Yeah, I'll let you exist. So he's not like, and it's quite good. I like that about Nagash, that he's kind of, like we even get horrible stuff where he creates ghouls, where he literally, for a laugh, makes people cannibals around his mountain Nagashazar.
Yeah.
Never needed to say that out loud yet. But around his mountain, where he just, for a laugh, just goes, "Hey, there's loads of people living here, and they started worshiping me as a god because I'm a big sorcerer. I'll tell them it's cool to eat each other." And then over years, they become like this ghoul tribe that worships Nagash, and he's just like, "Lol." It's yeah. He's just
yeah,
you
he
can't
is
go into
the
it, but you can't have a conversation about Warhammer Fantasy without Nagash appearing at some point, and I think that's what puts him so high up on the pantheon of villainy.
he is like, I know later on it became more Archaon, but he is really the big bad of fantasy.
Yeah, because he's inevitable. It's the
Yeah,
idea of going, cool, you beat Archaon, cool, you killed Malekith, or oh, cool, you've toppled the Skaven kind of thing. That's great. Nagash will still win. Nagash is inevitable, unless they do something about him. And in the fantasy lore that we got, they hadn't. And that it was only like true heroes that defeated him. And I think when we define villains by the heroes they create to oppose them, I think. And so we have characters like Alcadizar, we have characters like Sigmar, we have characters like, where he doesn't get defeated the next time, really. Well, like Manfred, I suppose.
yeah.
A dick, but no. So he doesn't die like in his third carnation.
But Alcazar goes mad, like he's already gone mad from the destruction of his kingdom. But the Fell
See,
Blade
it
destroys his sanity, and he
No.
just disappears. And then Sigmar is the only one who
Well,
comes out of this conflict with him sort of unscathed.
technically, sort of because what happens in the Sigmar novels? I've got them on my shelf. Who are they by? The Sigmar novels. Out of my eye line. Yeah, but the Sigmar novels, they have it where Nagash kind of possesses Sigmar for a good few months. He does like a proper, what's it called from Lord of the Rings?
Like
Theanor. Theanor, where it's like Saruman possesses him. Because we have it where Sigmar finds the crown of Nagash in, what's that place called? It's a Bretonian place.
yeah, because he sort of goes a bit unpleasant to Sigmar when he's wearing the crown, but
Yeah,
he's the only person who's manages to take it off because
yeah.
everyone else can't
He's strong
resist
enough
the
to
power.
take it off, but it's the fact of otherwise he probably would have been possessed by Nagash and like become like an incarnation of Nagash. But he's strong enough to do it. But obviously, it destroys his mind. And while he does manage to defeat Nagash on the battlefield, he suffers for it. And then obviously the way Sigmar ends is that he just kind of gets old, feels a bit sort of tired and worn, and then just wanders off into the wastes to die. And then they're like, "Cool. Well, I think he's going to become a god."
We've just decided that.
Well, I get annoyed because I like the idea that Sigmar wasn't a god. Like that there's some that the humans believe he is, and that everything's based upon faith. And so he's a different kind of entity in a world where we have actual gods like Cain and Mor
Well,
and
I
thing.
like the ambiguity of it in that. Did he become a god? Was Ulrich really Is Ulrich really answering the prayers addressed to Sigmar? Like, what's
Yeah,
going on?
I love that. I love that idea. And then obviously, like in the end times, they're like, "Oh, it's Karl Franz has been possessed by like Sigmar,"
Yeah, he did become a god. Here's the answer.
Yeah, and in Age of Sigmar, where you like, I think this is the thing. Like, regardless of what happens with Sigmar's lore, because luckily, Age of Sigmar is in a good place lore-wise, simply because they've kind of ignored everything they did previously. Where because when Sigmar came out, it was just like, this is terrible. Like, this is awful lore, because it was like going, hey, the world exploded, and then Sigmar appears, and he's a god, and he goes off into space, and he meets a space dragon with a big, long-winded, possibly copyrightable name, and then that space dragon becomes his friend, and then he teaches him how to rebuild planets. So Sigmar goes back to the planet, and he brings it all together into realms that look suspiciously like those from Nordic mythology and the Thor comics. And then Sigmar creates loads of people. He learns how to create people, and he brings people back from the dead. And then he brings the Chaos Gods back because that's a great idea. And he brings Nagash back because that's a brilliant idea that's never going to backfire.
It makes perfect sense.
And it's this train of thing of just going, so what? And then he sort of takes rules the entire world, everything's hunky-dory, and then Chaos goes, oh cool, we're back, and then they destroy everything, and then he's like, oh okay, I'll create Stormcast to reconquer it. And you just go, yeah, okay, scrap all of that. Like, if they'd made it where Age of Sigmar started with like wanderers in a wasteland kind of thing, and that it was this fully evolving rule set where the armies didn't know where they were, that would have been really cool. But instead it kind of starts being like, it's been 10,000 years. No, it's been like 40,000 years since the world was destroyed, and all this stuff has happened, and we've got all this story that we'll go into later. But you're like, you could start anything that way, like, why? It's not really a continuation. It's literally, they could have just made a whole new game that's nothing to do with fantasy, not based upon fantasy at all, and had it separate to everything.
It certainly didn't have the best
they have for Age of Sigmar. But luckily they've got, I think it's in a good place now in terms of the authors have enough to play with, because I think at the start they were just given nothing. They just went, oh, here's a book on Nordic mythology, go.
Don't use any of this.
Well, but that's it. But then the problem is, all the authors were just like, "Oh shit!" Well, can we have characters coming back? All right. So all of the books are like, they go, "Hey, here's a character who is suspiciously like Krell, but we're not allowed to say it's Krell because Games Workshop will tell us off. But it's Krell." Balthazar Gelt is back, and he's a Stormcast because reasons. And Trek's back, and yeah, it winds me up. And I think they've kind of ruined Nagash a little bit, but I think if there was one character that you could get from Warhammer Fantasy and turn him into a cartoony version of what he is, or a Saturday morning TV series like cartoon bad guy, it was Nagash.
So and Nagash is Skeletor in effect.
Yeah, effectively, like he's this sort of, because like we talk about in fantasy where he gets killed twice and then he's like around the end for his third incarnation, I think. In Sigmar, he's died like 3 times before Sigmar starts, because there's been a war, and then Nagash went, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to you anymore," because him and Sigmar were besties, and then Nagash betrayed him or something, and then Sigmar killed him, and then he came back, and then Archaon killed Nagash again, and it's literally just like, oh yeah, there's all this story that we're not going to go into, but it puts us into the position we're in now. It's
to a fantasy bitter ender like myself, Sigmar and Nagash were friends. What?
Yeah, no. Sigmar is so fucking weird because it's effectively this whole, hey, it's us against chaos, and then you're sort of like going, but no, like I find
that was Vlad's justification, and they didn't go for it in the Warhammer world. So what's changed?
Well, it worked for a bit. Like I think it was wonderfully done. Like this uneasy alliance between sort of like Vlad von Carstein and the Empire, and I think it was done very well. Whereas Age of Sigmar kind of just expects you to believe people are okay with Morathi. Like, the people are just like, oh yeah, she's a good guy. And then like, oh well, she's not. She's a good guy in terms of how you field her, but she's not really a nice person. And you're like, not a nice person, and it's a strange thing. And you just kind of go like, and it's a bit weird. Like I think it's that the cartoony nature of things. But in the latest supplement for Age of Sigmar, we've had where Morathi has actually sort of shown her true colors, and she's kind of messed everyone over. So the latest bit of the story so far ends with her sort of fucking over the Stormcast and Sigmar and being like, okay, I'm going to start the Dark Elf Empire again.
On the battlefield, speaking about the end times, one of the few things I actually liked about the end times was when they brought out the Nagash model. which, as I have alluded to, he's got a very impressive hat.
Yeah.
But that's one of the best late era 8 things that they did. It's such a good looking model.
Well, it was fantastic. I've still got the white dwarf on the shelf next to me. Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic because it inspired people. Like the amount of people I knew. Like I think Games Workshop massively misjudged the end times because it was a massive. Because the problem is that they did this thing, and then everyone went wild for it, and then it didn't last long enough, and that they kind of obviously didn't have any follow through with it. So you had like, they went, "Hey, here's the end times, here's Nagash," and then and also we've made it where Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings aren't shit anymore, and you can merge them together into one force that's really, really like competitive, like where combining them together and being like, "Hey, it's Tomb Kings, but they can march." If they're within 12 inches of the general, and they don't crumble anymore, kind of thing. So you can be risky with your Vampire Lord and stuff.
So yeah, you've got your new combined rules. You've got your issues addressed. You've bought your £50 Nagash model and painted them all up, and then they blow the world up.
Yeah, and that's it. And like loads of people were just kind of like going, "Oh my god, I'm going to start Tomb Kings if they're viable in the game. I'm going to start them, and then we're going to have this cool thing led by Nagash. Oh, it's going to be amazing." And then obviously that lasted like a sort of, was it 4 months that the end times lasted? I don't know, 4 months or 6 months, maybe more than that. But it was the fact of, everyone started Tomb King's armies and stuff, and Games Workshop were probably sitting around being like, "Oh shit, okay." Well, it's like if they put the Bretonnians in the end times and gone like, "Hey, here's some updated rules for this army that hasn't had a codex in like 2 editions." And then and then they go, "Oh well, actually, we're getting rid of them all. So, fuck you." But remember the books? Like when the books came out, they just sold out instantly. Like the end times books. Like I had to wait. A month for, was it Kane? I think it was Glotkin actually, because the special edition of Glotkin, like the £100 limited editions Glotkin book, sold out in minutes because they obviously hadn't expected as many of them. And you're like, yeah, this is what happens when you put like a focus on something, like when you put a focus on fantasy rather than it just being 40k and
Well, unfortunately, they didn't turn from their decision to kill it anyway.
I think it was because if you see the interviews with the guys who developed Age of Sigmar, they were like, "It's not ready." They were very kind of
you
like,
don't say.
"It's not ready." And then I think Games Workshop were like, "Nope, get it out the door." When it first came out, because I was like, "Oh, thank God, it's like a skirmish game, so I can get my mates playing." Because if I can get my mate to buy like a box of skeletons or a box of Chaos Warriors, and then we can have like little sort of 200-point game kind of thing on the coffee table, then that'll kind of get them into the hobby and stuff like that. And and I was like, this is amazing. And then what happened was, because the rules were so vague and just there, the Chaos Warriors always won. Sorry, I've gone totally off topic, but I was talking about Nagash. I don't want to say too much more about Nagash because there's so much to read and there's so much to him, and I don't think anyone listening to this is going to deny that he's an evil bastard.
Adam picked him for his character one, and I had to cut so much stuff because you can just talk about him forever.
Well, but that's it.
Because he's been in it forever.
We talk about sort of like Moonclaw, not much on him. Heinrich Kemmler, he's been in, I think he's in 2 Gotrek and Felix novels. But essentially he's not really there's not too much lore in him. He's just always there at different events. But Nagash, we have novels, he's the Sauron of Warhammer Fantasy. Like he's the threat behind the surface that's always there.
Well, linked to Nagash is my penultimate choice, which is Neferata.
Oh, right, Neferata. I wasn't expecting to see her on this list.
And that's because she's sort of...
I think, is it because you hate women? Is that what this is? Is this?
Well,
I just think that she's a strong, independent woman who's made her own way in the world through ancient Lamia, and she's murdered a few thousand people, and she's created an entire race of vampires herself. But
she's got Spice World on VHS. She's
okay. That is pretty evil, Apparently, you can't even buy Spice World anymore. It's so bad that it hasn't even had like a trauma DVD release. Or
need to get the Blu-ray. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with Neferata. Yes, she is a strong, independent woman who started vampirism, which has infected the Empire and human worlds, human nations ever since. So she's had a destabilizing influence on that. She
pick faults, I suppose.
well, she's a villain, yeah. But she's effective as a villain. She's sort of like in the background. She starts off very much in the foreground, where she wants to learn the Leash Priest's powers, and she said, "Nope, your destiny is to rule." Which I read when I was doing research. Somebody said, "Oh, what a patriarchal society! She wasn't allowed to learn magic. Instead, she was ordered to rule the country." Like, what does that? I'm not quite sure you know what that means. But anyway,
it's like going, yeah, it's like the opposite of a patriarchy.
Yeah, you can't do the not so powerful thing. You're expected to do the rule of the country, whatever. So she she stops them burning Nagash's books, and she reads one of them, which is where she gets the elixir of life that we were discussing earlier from.
She follows the IKEA instructions.
Yeah, she can't translate it from Nagash's Swedish, so it goes a bit wrong.
And rather than ending up with a Billy bookcase, she's got a vampire,
bloody bookcase, as it were. So she has to feed off the blood to maintain herself. She shares it with a sort of inner circle, becomes this deathless court. She tries to get Khalida in on it, who's her cousin, who is the Asp. She's like Asef's chosen, whatever.
Yeah.
When she realizes that Khalida won't have it, she tries to kill her and manages to kill her, and tries to infect her with no consent. So that's a bit villainous, isn't it?
It's a bit. I'm not going to say the word, but it's
I don't want to be. Yeah, we know where we're going with that.
Demonetized.
Or
YouTube gold.
Community standard strike, or whatever it is. So she she'll try to do it that way. So she's like devious. If I can't persuade her, I'll give her the vampirism where she likes it or not.
The Fortunately, strange thing is, though, that the novel, the Josh Reynolds novel, makes it that it's very much from a place of love. Like it's the fact that
he's a vampire apologist then.
I think it's the idea of Neferata is so in love with her cousin, like not in that way, but like she loves her so much that she's like, look, I want you to exist alongside me. I want you to do this. And the fact that she doesn't want it, like Khalida sees it for what it actually is, this horrible kind of curse, that Neferata sort of goes no, and forces it on her. I don't know. I think it's done from not from an evil thing. Like she's not trying to punish Khalida.
You're just a vampire apologist. Which is...
I think it's just because I think Neferata is one of the wonderfully nuanced characters of.
Yeah, she's not. I was reading it like this one,
Manfred, where they're actually just, think of myself, murder everyone. I think.
Yeah, that's why I picked it, because I was thinking, if you're going for the stereotypical, villainous factions, all of them seem. I don't want to see be a hipster, it's too obvious. But yeah, Vlad, Manfred, Nagash is a different category because he is a world-ending threat. But everyone else in the book, and Neferata isn't even a playable character, I don't think.
She's in the end times, and she has rules in 5th edition. Her rules, I think, are when they brought out the first Vampire Counts book. So I think it's 5th
edition. But she's
got a cat. They've retconned the cat, which is, she had a what's his name, Bastet.
Oh right,
Bastet the cat, and you could put him next to a unit on the board, and then it got bad luck. So I think it got -6 or something. And it was one of the ugliest models I've ever seen. Because where it was one of those ones where where they don't quite know what scale they're going to. So and they don't, and it's like they've never seen a woman before. So she's got her tits are far too high, and then she just has these little tiny. The hips are far too low down. It's an awful model. I've got it somewhere upstairs because I don't know, completionist, but yeah.
To break that out.
She's another one with a great hat. If we look at her end times incarnation,
See,
like that is a hat.
The strong hat game towards the end of fantasy. But anyway, yeah. So she corrupts or if you want, brings everlasting life to the Larmian court, and then I think it's a brother steals the elixir. She's very selective about who she brings in to be a vampire, and they come up with sort of rules to say like, oh, we'll only feed on prisoners and stuff like that. But it's like a secret that she can't maintain it, and the bloodlines start to evolve with these strong personalities who have all been part of the court, and she sort of loses control of it a bit, and then that sort of spirals off into the vampires having a, doing their own thing in the world. So I thought she was, when I was reading about it, I knew about her just from the Tomb King's book that you get, oh yes, Khalida fought her and the Asp goddess cleansed her of the vampiric taint. When you look into her, she's really, I found her a very interesting character. And then she's still alive now. Apparently, she's in the end, not anymore. But she's holding out in some dwarf fortress where she's got a network of spies and informers. And she's sort of like, she's an arch manipulator. She's getting information and intrigues from courts around the world, like the Empire, Britonia, the Ulthwa, Nagash, and she's sort of manipulating events behind the scenes. And she's not like, she doesn't use her vampiric powers in such a like an overt way, like to invade somewhere or to raise a load of people from the dead. She's sort of manipulating things behind the scenes. And I thought that was, if you've got the gift of immortality, that's just as a legitimate way to get your ends. That's not, I'll rephrase that. That's just as a legitimate way to achieve your ends as conquering or as raising loads of people from the dead or using magic. So I found her quite an interesting, because she's still a villain. She's a vampire who's trying to corrupt the world into her own what she wants. But the more I read about her, the more I found her an interesting, because I wasn't really aware of her much before that.
She's a fascinating character. Like, I would never have thought about her, but I think that's exactly her power. Her power is that you don't realize that she's such a player in the world.
Realize, you don't even think that she exists, but she.
Yeah, like a lot of the stuff that happens, like when we look at anything to do with the vampire counts, we kind of go, "Is that Neferata? Like, is that actually her doing?" Like when we think about like Vlad and Manfred and Vlad dying, you kind of just go, "Was that instigated by her? Was that assassin sent by her rather than like Manfred?" Or
is she pulling the strings from behind the scenes? Or and like, I know it's only.
And she's one of the few vampires to like stand up to Nagash, where she serves Nagash willingly because it's the best course of action, rather than being kind of enslaved or
is it more like a self-preservation sort of thing where it's best for her outcome is to do.
Because you have like Manfred, where he's kind of like, oh, I'm going along with Nagash and I'll overthrow him at some point, and things like this cockiness where it's not going to work. Like, for a fact, like, and then he tries that. Like, I think in the novel they had about how Nagash gets back to life, it's Manfred working with Arkan the Black. But Manfred's like, and then as soon as Nagash gets born, I'm going to kill him and steal all of his power, and then I'll become the great necromancer of the world. And it's like, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Whereas Neferata, you kind of just go, she's doing the same thing, but you kind of go, you might actually pull this off. You're actually clever enough to.
She's like the archetype of soft power.
Yeah,
she's not using military means or whatever. That she's using influence and manipulation, and I just found it quite interesting that I'd never known anything about before as I was reading into her. So I thought, she's
And she's not evil in the sense of like she's a vampire and she like murders people and stuff like that, but her actual end goal is just domination. It's just she just wants to rule the world and she just wants to be the ruler of everything, rather than say like when we talk about the Dark Elder or we talk about Nagash, who have far more horrible end games. Neferata is just like everyone, all the countries in the world can keep carrying on the way they do, and we can have the empire, we can have Ulthuan and stuff, as long as I am the person in control of all of these things, and that I am pulling the strings behind everything.
And there's also some, I don't know, it depends again how far you want to read into it. There's some interesting character development because she rules Lamia and she tries to keep it all a secret and she tries to run it, but it inevitably leaks out and the nation's destroyed. So she sort of learns that that sort of power isn't as effective. So she changes the methods. So that's when she becomes like a behind the scenes influencer. So that was quite. I mean, it's only a small thing.
I think in the novel it has it where she, basically when she's been around for too long and that people would notice that, oh, you are 300 years old or something. That I think that's why she sort of takes a back seat and then lets someone rule in her stead, and she's like telling them what to do. But then obviously, as soon as they find out that she's still alive and she's still pulling all the strings, then that's how the fall of Lamia occurs.
And she picks people who she identifies people who would be useful to her, and that's how she inducts them into becoming vampires. And she'll set things up so that adventurers will come to her dwarf castle, but it's exactly who she wants. It's like she'll manipulate it so it's exactly who she needs to turn up to convert into a vampire or do something that she needs to complete some task that she needs doing. So she's very controlled and manipulative, and it's
I like it.
Yeah, I was surprised. So that's my number 2.
I'm going to go into my number 1 now, which is someone who is very, very similar to Neferata. What have you guessed?
Well, I put Morathi.
You've got it.
Yes, knew it.
My number 1, my villain, my greatest villain in all of Warhammer is Morathi.
So, in fact, you hate women as well.
Yes, but I'm more blatant about it because, but no, I think it's the fact that Morathi is just like, it's the fact that she's not evil at her core, but she still does everything. Like, it's the fact that she is there from the start. She's responsible for so much stuff. Like, Nagash is like a blip on the radar when it comes to what Morathi's seen and what Morathi's like influenced. And obviously by connection, Neferata is the same, where she's like less than Nagash. But Morathi is, like, because with Malekith is he's a tragic character. He's someone where you feel like something's been stolen from him. But then Morathi is just, I don't think she was a good person to start with. I think she was a jealous person to start with. And, and we don't really see a benefit to Anarion, like being married to Morathi. Like,
no, she's had like a single-minded objective for personal power and power for a son.
Yeah.
And everything is manipulated into that objective.
And it's even though her lore specifically points out that she genuinely was in love with Anarion, and that, she's genuinely kind of in love with Tyrion, who she believes is like Anarion's like sort of, reincarnation. It's the fact that you still have that nagging feeling of going like, but you married him for power, didn't you? Yeah. And it's that kind of, she's just so evil from from bringing in from utilizing the chaos gods. Like her last moment in the end times, her last moment in Warhammer Fantasy is that she's like, I'm going to open a rift that allows Slaanesh to enter our world just to kill my enemies, and I don't care if I get swallowed up, I don't care about anything, I just want to destroy these people that have pissed me off. And it's so selfish, it's so wicked. That's her whole thing.
That's a good term for her, selfish, because she knows what the cults of pleasure and all that. She knows that it's not in the interest of even Dark Elf society to have these things run out of control.
Yeah.
But she's either a semi-open or open Slanesh worshipper by the end.
Yeah, and it's this idea where it's purely for power. It's not that, you get the impression that she doesn't like pleasure that much. She's not about, so she's beyond the point of sort of liking orgies and stuff like that. It's the idea of she's doing it purely for power because she knows that she can control this. Like she's
absolutely.
She's done deals with Slanesh to be like going, hey, do you want to kind of destroy this place together? And then she's fucked over Slanesh. Then she's like, and she's like, double crossed a chaos god. Like
because there was the cult of pleasure lists, wasn't there, where you had Dark Elves allied with Slanesh demons and things like that.
I think it got retconned, but the fact is, it's in everyone's lore. Like everyone, you look at the 8th edition books and they're like, oh, cool. The cult of pleasure didn't really, it was all a trick and Morathi didn't mean it, kind of thing. But then you still go, no, she'll use chaos for power. Like, when we have the fall of the what's it called, the vortex in Dark Elf in elven lore and stuff, she was like part of that. She was just like, it's just a tiny rift into the realm of chaos. It's not gonna, cause too much of a problem. But it'll destroy Ulthuan though, so that's good. And then you think about Malekith, where Malekith is his tragic figure, but Morathi's always there behind him, and regardless of what he thinks, she's manipulating him. Like, he's doing exactly what Morathi wants. Like, there's a wonderful bit in the video I posted a couple of weeks ago, which is where Malekith starts actually sort of becoming a better person, where he starts getting bored of his hatred of Ulthuan, and he's like, well, actually, maybe we should just focus on having making, Nagaroth as good as it can be and stuff.
Is this
and,
where they find his wife?
Yeah. And then Morathi's just like, gotta fix this, can't have my son being happy. It's not that, it's can't have my son doing what I don't want him to be doing.
It's like that break of control that she's in manipulation that she's got over him, because he's now closer to happiness with his wife. Like, no, that can't happen.
That's it. And I think there's specifically a line in the lore that basically just goes like, how it cheered her up to see the final glimmer of hope in Malekith like die, so that she knew that like he would just only ever live to destroy Ulthuan. And you're like, that's bad parenting. I'm going to put that out there. Like, my hot take for the day is that's I think if they'd done wife swap or something, but like Nagaroth edition,
who would
I think Alariel swapped it. Well, Alariel swapped with Morathi. I think that could have been.
But it's usually a status swap, so it wouldn't be a king swapping with a queen swapping with a queen. It would be, I don't know, some peasant in Stirland.
And she's just like, okay, well, crops aren't doing well, so I think you should kill everyone. I think you should kill everyone in the entire village.
Next door farmer seems to be doing better than us. Why don't we raid him and kill all his family and steal all his stuff?
I've enlisted the help of a chaos god, so
to till the field.
Yeah, that's it.
And I'm just about to double cross them. So shall we go?
Yeah, and I love Morathi. I think Morathi is one of my favorite things, and it's this idea when we talk about Neferata being sort of like a villain, but you don't realize it because that's how clever she is. Morathi's like the sort of, you're aware of me, I'm absolutely terrifying, I'm behind everything, and you're aware of some of it, but not all of it. Like, it's
even going back to,
I think she doesn't seem like much of a threat, even though she really is.
Even going back to how Anarion found her and rescued her in inverted commas from a Slanesh warlord.
I think that's high elf propaganda right there.
That's a total setup. That she wasn't rescued; she was part of that warlord.
Look, make it look real. Keep her secrets. It's like, oh, all right, mistress. I don't know why they talk like that.
It's because they're from 1880s London.
It's probably because I can only do like two voices. All right, mistress. Right, I'll make it look real. I'll cut you with my little Slaneshi claw. Right on, governor.
You sounded a bit like the peasant from Warcraft there.
There's obscure references.
Yeah. Okay. count them. Yeah, I fully agree with Morathi, but like everything, she's got this grand plan, and even when, because there's a time when Malekith locks her up, because she gives up Grond, or she sacrifices a load of things to chaos or something, and he says, hang on, you've gone too far here. But
Yeah, well,
even
yeah,
then, you get the impression that, well, she expected this. This is all part of
it's
part
all
of the
this
plan.
thing. She's wonderful. Like it's the thing is, I think the Dark Elves and Morathi especially make me want there to be a Warhammer TV show. Like because she's the perfect Game of Thrones type villain, where where it's this idea of even when they think they've got her, she's still the one pulling the strings. Like
Yeah,
so, I think where Malekith gets beaten. I think Malekith gets defeated by Teclis in a fight because Teclis reignites the flame of Asurian in
that's
Malekith.
the Battle of Finneval Plain.
Yeah.
Which
So
is,
and then Malekith escapes from it by going into the realm of chaos. So he's missing for months. And Morathi's like, oh, and then Nagaroth explodes, and everyone's like, I'm going to be the new Witch King kind of thing. I'm going to take charge. And I think Kuran finds when he comes back and he's like, what the fuck? What's happened here? And he finds Morathi in jail, and then it turns out that actually Morathi's put herself in jail to keep herself safe, but then she's manipulating everyone with a network of
yeah,
spies, and that she's got, and that she's controlling the entire country from a jail cell.
yeah. Isn't she like she's deliberately saying, "Oh, you'll be the next Witch King," or "You'll be," just to keep them destroying each
Yeah,
other, so that none of
that's
them
it.
raises to the top.
And that ends with Kuran being like, "Oh, I'll just kill I'll get them all in one room, murder them all," and then Morathi's like, "Cool, I'll unlock the jail cell. Right, that was fun. Now to business." And you just and she's so perfect as a villain. Like, and I get annoyed that there isn't more media that we can have a character like Morathi in.
Yeah, she would be a good like Game of Thrones, sort of like a more competent Cersei.
Yeah, I just think, imagine that. Like, I think that's the thing. It's like 40K, because they've kind of hobbled the law by making it so dependent on Space Marines. You couldn't do a TV series because it would just only be from the Space Marines' point of view. Like you couldn't have it where you're going, hey, now let's cut to what the Dark Elder are doing, kind of thing. Like that wouldn't fit. Whereas fantasy, you could happily go like, okay, the orcs are the protagonists of this, and we're going to cut to the Dark Elves and what they're doing and what the Skaven are doing and stuff like that. You could make an amazing show with that.
Any Hollywood producers listening to this, and I know you do, if you want to spec script, comment below.
You'd have to wrest the rights from Games Workshop. They've realized after Total War that they've got a cash cow here that they weren't using before.
That must have been the day that I just keep thinking like we've blown up the world, and then they've made Creative Assembly have made the best game they'll probably ever make based on a line that we no longer make.
I think
Just imagine all the people coming. Oh, I've played Total War. Can I buy some stuff out of Total Warhammer? No, you can't. But we do have this Age of Sigmar stuff. Is that the same?
It was embarrassing because I remember that like Total War Warhammer won like best game of the year, where it won like all the awards for sort of like this is like the best game that came out. And then Games Workshop sent out like a newsletter being like, hey, it's like, you've played the game, now own the models. We have Carl Franz on Griffin and and a wizard.
Yeah.
Because you're just going like, oh, cool. Can I buy Balthazar Gelt? No. Can I buy Morathi? No. Can I buy, like the Bretonnians? No. Oh, can I buy Heinrich Kammler? Yes, but we've just called him a necromancer, so it's no pointless searching on the store.
Well, I love the new Tomb King DLC. I'd like to buy some.
And you're just sitting there being like, and the least they should have done is had a tie-in made to order, rather than a very awkward mailing list where they just went like, hey, we've got models, but they're not what is in the game. If they've just done it where they go, for a month, we're going to bring back bloody, Throg. We're going to bring back like Sigvald. We're going to bring back, Well, actually, Sigvald was around as like a standard hero, I think. We're gonna like bring back, Balthazar Gelt and stuff. There's so many of them, but I can't think of them because I don't know the orc names. But all of the models, like Grecius Goldtooth, he hasn't been in the games, but it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you
If they
just
did
go,
that-
oh, they're not available. Like you get people on trading groups being like, oh, I'm willing to pay like 40 quid for a Vlad von Carstein model because I really want one. And then you're like, it's on the, you can still buy it on the web store. Oh, but it's listed as vampire. So, surely they would make their website where you could search for the old name and it brings up the model still. But then no, see, you have all these people playing Total War being like, can't get that anymore,
Yeah, because it's great. I want to buy it. Have you seen the Idenith Deepkin? Like, they're not in the game.
Yeah, and we haven't even gone into the fact that bloody, she's fucked over her own race as much as she has, like with Helebron, like, with Malekith. She's a danger to everyone around her. And unlike Nagash, I think she's going to do it. Like, I think, I genuinely kind of think that, like, even if she came up against Nagash, she'd probably find a way to destroy him.
Well, she's been around this long, so she's a survivor.
That's it. I absolutely love her, and she's my pick for the greatest villain in Warhammer.
I think you might. This isn't any particular order because my next one is a very obscure one from 40k.
Moonclaw.
No, it's similar. I don't know if you've heard of him, but it's the Doom of Malantai.
Isn't that a Tyranid?
It is a Tyranid.
These aren't in order, are they?
No, they're not.
Okay, I was going to say it's just like that. Well, you're talking to me about being an edgelord. It's just like, this
isn't number one villain. This is just
okay.
This is just a villain. This is the one I struggled about because I thought, should I have Galrauch? But it doesn't.
I think that the most horrible thing we have about the Doom of what is it, Malantai? Malantai is that model. Isn't it the same as the Red Terror model?
Oh no, they never had a model for this.
Oh, okay, right. Because that Red Terror model is like going, you should have remade this. You should either stop selling this or remake it. Because this is like 3rd edition.
It doesn't even
awful
fit
metal.
Yeah, it looks like a length of pasta.
It's like Bellacore, where you're just like, and this is £20. This sort of
in white. Lead. The Doom of Malantai is just he's not even in the game anymore. But his lore is High Fleet Naga is fighting the Eldar. There's this craft world called Malantai who sort of they break one of the tendrils of Hydra, Naga, and it's sort of clearing up and killing all what's left. And there's one final bio ship that crashes into it, and they think they've killed everything, but one of the zoanthropes ends up crashing through the infinity circuit, so it absorbs all of the psychic power of the craft world, which turns it up to that's so it turns it up to 11. It's not just a normal zoanthrope. Instead of feeding on normal stuff, it's fed on the entire infinity circuit of the craft world. So it ends up just ripping the craft world apart, and then it vanishes. It never comes back, unfortunately. But I mean, that's a bit daft. But it's.
I think it's a testament to Tyranid ingenuity, really. Like anything else would just explode, and the Zonophobes like, I can do it.
Yeah. So everything else has died. So it takes on the entire craft world and reduces it to ash. It absorbs all the infinity circuit, absorbs all the psychic power. But if you ever saw it in the game, it didn't have a model. I don't think it had a model, but you just use the zoanthrope to represent it. But it had some crazy rules. It had this spirit leech rule. So anything within 6 inches of it, any enemy, had to take a leadership test on 3d6 and then lost the amount of wounds that it failed the leadership test by.
Yeah.
Stacking onto that is it was automatically, it gave -2 leadership to all Eldar and Slaanesh demons for some reason in its what do you call it, synapse range. So it's minus. So if you play an Eldar, that's 3d6 minus 2. Your leadership's -2, and it's 3d6. It gained a wound for every wound it caused. It gained a wound back to a maximum of 10, and then it added 10. It added its number of wounds to its warp charges. So in the old game, if you remember warp charges, that's what fueled your psychic powers rather than rolling a dice. So this thing, unless you killed it immediately, as soon as it started racking up kills, and it had a warp mastery of 5, I think, which meant I think that was how many powers it could cast. So unless you killed it immediately, when it started killing things, it became unstoppable, and all of its little abilities buffed itself. So it was like,
hell. Because I'd never heard of it. That sounds absolutely. That sounds like the Nightbringer of 9th edition, the Necron Nightbringer of Tyranids, really.
yeah. I mean, I think they got rid of it in 6th, and then it wasn't in. It might have even been 5th, but I think it was 6th that got rid of it. I don't know why, because the Tyranids were completely debuffed, and this was like a little thing that you could build an army around.
Yeah.
But it's like this. It sort of sums up the Tyranids in a bit that, you leave something uncontrolled, or you take your eye off the ball for a bit, and they just take a total advantage of all the biomass around it. And this thing is just, it's killing people, absorbing the wounds, buffing its own wounds, which means it can kill more people, which means it gets more wounds. It had a 3-up invulnerable save and 10, like maximum 10 wounds. So it's hard to kill. And you can it's the same thing like distraction carnifex, to speak of Tyranids. You can point all your guns at it to kill it and get rid of it, in which case the rest of the army goes around and does whatever it wants. Or you can ignore it and it just starts wiping stuff out.
How many points was it?
I don't know. I can't remember. I can't find my old Tyranid codex.
Otherwise, that's terrifying. Like,
I don't think it was super expensive though.
well, I'm like I say, I brought up the Nightbringer for 40k. That is the silliest rules I've ever seen for anything. Like, I don't know if you've seen the new Necron codex.
I haven't seen the new one. I remember the old one where it's like you couldn't kill it.
It's just like the most silly thing in the entire world. And then and then an FAQ came out because we were like expecting, oh, cool, everyone's bought it, everyone's using it, it's like meta at the moment, and then they're going to nerf it in the next FAQ. And then the FAQ came out and they were like, oh, it's 20 points more expensive. And you're like, really? That's all you're going to do? Like, it's what is it? It's something like, I think it has like 7 attacks or something and does 3 damage a hit, but that extends to like 6 damage, and you can't take you can't take invulnerable saves against it. And
that's about right.
It ignores any abilities that stop you ignoring wounds, so you don't get feel no pain against it. And then they FAQ'd it just to make it a bit worse. They FAQ'd it that also includes like wound limits. So stuff like units that kind of say, hey, they can only suffer 3 wounds a turn. He's like, nah.
Oh, like Thraka.
Yeah, like Thraka, and they're going to give to all the Primarchs, and they've given to like, what's his name, the Mortarion and stuff. Yeah, and he's just like, nope, cool, I can just kill you. Like, and then on top of that, he's a Psyker, and then on top of that, he has shooting as well. And it's just ludicrous, and he's like 207. No, I think he's like 300 and something points. And you're like, when would we not take that? Like, and it's like a distraction carnifex, but that's incredibly difficult to kill because it can only suffer 3 wounds a turn.
Well, that's why I think they should bring, if they're going to go mad, which 8th and 9th edition is,
bring this back.
Yeah, bring this sort of thing back, because it's just the sort of nightmare fuel thing that you want as a Tyranid player.
Well, I like it as the Eldar because, like, the Eldar are sort of like a, like they're a dead race essentially. Like, the Dark Eldar are kind of thriving, whereas the Eldar themselves are, they're like survivors. They're like the last stragglers of this amazing race. And to lose a whole craft world,
yeah,
is such a, in the context of the Eldar, is such a massive deal. But it's a shame, isn't it, that Tyranids don't really have special characters? Like,
There's the Swarm Lord, who's probably the only one. They had the Parasite of Mortrex.
The Red Terror, and didn't
Red
they
Terror.
have Old One Eye?
Old One Eye, yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, these are kind of like they're like sort of Vlad and Isabella, where it goes, hey, these existed at one point, so when you play them, it's kind of within that lore.
Yeah, because they're all like the Old One Eye's dead, I think, canonically, even though he comes back, but I think he's believed to be dead. The Doom of Malantai is a one-shot thing. It did Malantai in and then it vanished. I don't know if the Parasite of Mortrex is still about. The Swarm Lord's still active.
It's still alive, the Doom of Malantai. It's just like it's just floating around in space, being like, I hope I hit an orbit soon.
It probably is. It's probably going absorbing a sun somewhere.
Maybe that's the Neferata of 40k. It's secretly
well,
it's hyper. No, it's done a whole
absorbing the warp
where it's become beyond flesh and beyond matter, and it's become
possibly
god behind the scene. The sixth chaos god.
The Doom of Malantai.
Yeah, he's got to have a name though. He's got to be like Jeff, the Tyrannid.
That's a bit unglamorous for something that can bring down a craft world.
To be fair, would you argue with him if he said, "Hello, I'm Jeff, and I can destroy you with a thought"?
I don't think he would say anything though. He would just sort of absorb your essence and move on.
Well, I hope he doesn't say anything because I can't really do other voices. So he's either a Cockney or he's silent. So
we'll go with silent. Silent's fine. But yeah, that was just my daft. He's not really a villain, as you're saying, because the Tyrannid's motivations are you don't know what they are. They're animalistic or what.
I kind of like the idea though that like I think there's been a niggling thing, and I think Games Workshop bring it out occasionally in editions, and then they kind of retract it and they go, "Oh, actually, yeah, let's not go too far." But where the idea of the Tyranids have sort of break-off consciousnesses, where you have stuff where you have the hive mind, which is unified like the Borg, but then you have it where occasionally there'll be like dissenters within the Tyranid race, and that could cause a problem for them. And I kind of like the idea of, like with Moonclaw, where there's not much on the page, but you could do something with it. Like maybe like, to bring bloody StarCraft into this, where Kerrigan becomes like a splinter of the Zerg, where she becomes a separate entity that can think for itself. I kind of like the idea.
You could do that with like a hive fleet that got cut off for an extended period for some reason from the hive mind.
All this beast becoming so intelligent and so independent because it absorbed more energy than a Tyranid's ever had individually, and so much intelligence and souls from the craft world that it could become like it actually goes, oh, I'm actually separate from the hive mind now. I can actually become a splinter kind of thing.
You could definitely do something with that.
Yeah, you could totally do, you could make that into a separate villain. And I think that's it. I think I like it being on the list, as well as the fact that it destroyed an entire fucking craft world.
They'll probably ignore this.
5 of these, it's like,
yeah, there's a sixth of the population dead.
They're like, oh great, that's what we needed. Thanks, Tyranids.
Good thing it didn't land on. Is it Iandan, who's effectively all Infinity Circuit using things?
Yeah, that's it. It'd be like that would have been a bad day.
Yeah, be a new god. Well, that's my top 5. I think I try to keep it a bit, as I was saying, hipstery and not obvious, even though I've got Angron on it and Helbron.
I like them. I liked all of your choices. I think mine were probably a bit straightforward, but yeah.
I think they were justified. Certainly Nagash, Morathi, they're like the top threat in the old world. I will put your Instagram and the link to your YouTube channel below. Like, subscribe, share, ring that bell, go to OnlyFans, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you like lore and well-painted models.
Don't follow me on Instagram.
Oh, come on. Another good painter who says that they're not a very good painter.
I'm struggling with this bloody... I'm like a red mage, where basically you get to a certain level of skill, but you don't get higher than that, but it's good. It's like good enough. But like when you see people, like I'm painting Bretonians at the moment, and I'm sick of my life. I hate them. Like I've painted a I painted a whole Vampire Counts army, a High Elf army, and a Beastman army in the same time that it's taken me to do one Bretonnian army, because I just lose the will to live painting all these horses and heraldry. And then you see some clever bastard on Instagram who's like, I've I've sort of like what's it called where you draw really wonderfully by hand?
Freehand.
Yeah, I've like freehanded all of the sort of, all of the stuff on all of the horses for all of my for 40 bloody Bretonnian knights, and you're like,
yeah,
well,
that's inhuman.
It's
although to the other side of that, if you're on Reddit and they'll go, oh, I just picked up my first model today, what do you think? And it's like heavy metal quality. Like, who are you trying to kid? That is not your first attempt at a model.
That's it. It's like, I think we should have competitions. I want to have a competition which is like to paint as badly as possible, where I get all of the people I know who are like absolutely stunning, like commission painters and stuff. Like, because you had Ian on the show a couple of weeks ago, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just like how amazing he is, and I'm just like, okay, the competition is to paint the worst model you possibly can, where we're wanting to see sort of like eyes that look like eggs, like fried eggs kind of thing. We want to see like sort of, everything missing the mark. I want to see that. I want to see that.
That would probably cause some people to have like aneurysms.
Yeah, they'll be like, but I must make it look good.
Yeah, the precision is not. Well, thank you for joining me on episode 7. I hope you've enjoyed it.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope that people have enjoyed hearing us talk shit, really.
Well, if they haven't enjoyed, at least it cranks up the view count.
If they've got here and they haven't enjoyed it, then have they considered possibly being a Dark Elf or Dark Eldar, really? Because that's a level of sadism.
It's a big commitment to pain. Well, anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.